Everybody loves a good time travel plot, right? Just think of Radiant Historia Perfect Chronology as Back to the Future, but with significantly less plot points about the main protagonist being attracted to his mum.
If I could turn back time.
Wait, that's not my intro?
JRPG.
Okay, so it's not really like Back to the Future at all. It's less Hollywood movie tackling time travel and more JRPG tackling time travel. I'm going to try and not give away any story spoilers, so I'm going to talk about my first little complaint with the game in very broad terms, and it's totally related to the story. Actually, I love them, and I think that Radiant Historia Perfect Chronology has one of the better stories for this kind of plot. I really enjoyed it. After the first 4 or 5 hours. This game has serious pacing issues in the beginning, and it is just unnecessary. By now, we all know the technical limitations of the 3DS, so choosing to have hours upon hours of quote-unquote cutscenes that are nothing more than semi-static illustrations of the character speaking and text boxes might not have been the best choice to get people interested in the story. It opens with about an hour worth of cutscenes that, as I already mentioned, are pretty much just pictures of characters and a whole lot of text. Then you finally get control of a character, you walk about 5 steps, then another 20 minutes of cutscenes. Then you get control again, walk about 10 steps, and then it's 40 minutes worth of cutscenes. Then you actually get your first taste of battle, and here we go with another half hour of cutscenes. And then we're back, and you get full control of the game for about 5 minutes. And then, what do you know? Another 40 minutes worth of cutscenes. And all of this is to lay the platform for a fairly common time travel plot that we've all seen before. It takes almost 5 hours of tedious text boxes to explain to the player that you are a guy, you have 2 other people on your team, you also have a book, oh, and that book lets you travel through time with the pretty standard restrictions on where, when, and for how long. See, I just summed it up in about 10 seconds. We didn't need hours of static illustrations, despite how good the art assets actually are. Having said all that, if you can make it through that tedious opening, you're in for one of the more interesting and gripping JRPG stories on the 3DS. Oh, absolutely. Radiant Historia Perfect Chronology is something I couldn't put down once I was hooked. It's just that that hook comes a little later than most games would intend. The whole story is gripping, there are some genuinely tense moments, and you can feel the emotion of the characters. It's about making tough decisions and ultimately saving the world by changing one outcome from the past at a time. The game revolves around the time travel plot, having you play out different scenarios in order to set the timeline on the right path, and it's all done through a relatable and likeable main protagonist. All the characters are likeable, really. Character building is one of the game's biggest strengths, and I say biggest strengths, but I'm struggling to think of anything this game does that isn't a strength, apart from that opening segment. Honestly, the narrative, characters, and story progression are so good that if it didn't bog you down in the start, I'd be willing to put it up there with the best JRPG stories of all time. And I'm not entirely unconvinced, especially when the gameplay is so thoroughly flexible and perfect. I'm led to believe that quite a few things were added in Perfect Chronology, other than more story content, and one of those things happens to be an easy mode. Now, an easy mode doesn't sound that exciting or groundbreaking, but it's not just any easy mode. What you would normally expect is that enemies in battle now have lower HP and do less damage, but actually what it does is allow you to skip battles altogether. Battles are turn-based, but they aren't random encounter. The way a battle starts is when you run into an enemy in the field. You can also slash an enemy before running into them to start the battle with an extra turn. But what easy mode does is make it so that when you slash an enemy in the field, that enemy dies instantly. It's an awesome idea and it's a welcome one. It reminds me of the encounter rate options in Bravely Default. It basically allows you to skip battles and just progress the story. There are of course battles you cannot skip, and you'll still need to do boss battles and event battles as normal. The battle system itself also reminds me of Bravely Default, not in a direct comparison way, but in the way that they've taken the turn-based battle system and added their own spin and their own mechanics to it. In Radiant Historia, they've blended a fairly traditional turn-based system with elements from strategy RPGs. Battles don't take place on a grid, but the enemies are on a grid, and you'll have to make use of abilities that alter their position on that grid to maximize your effectiveness in battle. An enemy in the backline will deal less damage than one on the front line, for example, and using an ability that knocks one enemy into another will double up the damage on subsequent attacks. It's a neat way to bring an extra layer of strategy into battle, and it works great. I actually didn't find myself using easy mode at all simply because battles never felt like a chore. I don't think you can sum up Radiant Historia Perfect Chronology without putting extra emphasis on the word perfect. While you can get bogged down in the first few hours, the second you break through you'll be hooked all the way to the finish. As you may have guessed from comments made throughout the review, I didn't play the original, and I've only come to regret that decision now. But the good thing is that even a newcomer won't feel lost. There are two options when you first start, one that lets you play through the original story as it was presented on the DS and lets you play the new story content afterwards, or you can play a mode that integrates the new story pieces into the playthrough itself. I went with the latter and never felt like I was missing anything. I honestly can't think of a reason you should not pick this up if you have a 3DS. It is easily one of the best games on the system. A brilliant narrative backed up with excellent gameplay, a hugely likable cast of characters, a solid soundtrack, and a near perfect experience. Now that I've finished it, I wish there was a way to play it again fresh.
If I could turn back time.
And speaking of finished, this review now is. But if you'd like to hit the like button below the video, that would be awesome. Also jump down to the comments and let me know what your favourite time travel story is, and don't just restrict yourself to games. Subscribe to see more content like this, check out the links in the video description to help support the channel, and other than that, I'll see you all soon.